Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Wisdom Wednesday for this week. So remember, with our Wisdom Wednesday, this is a generalized spiritual discussion. And with this generalized spiritual discussion, the topic is chosen just based off the energies that we are currently working with. And with the intensity of Scorpio in the full moon, I thought what a great topic we could talk about. But the different levels of releasing and kind of where we are in there and how we can really get to that final level of letting something go, fully surrendering, fully letting it be exactly what it is. Because that's what we are working with. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns as you hear me talking that are about this topic, and please be sure to keep it within this topic, then feel free to put them in the comments. And yeah, we will begin. I love to see your questions and comments about the topic that we're talking about. If you're interested in finding more about me, hey Shirley, hey Bridget. Hello Sharon, thanks for joining, thanks for being here, thanks for sharing this out, guys. So if you want to learn more about me or my services, you can go to my website. You can also find out all the free things that I have there. And you can also go to my YouTube channel where you can see all the replays of all the previous Wisdom Wednesdays. Hello, Gwendolyn. Thanks for joining. Thanks for being here. So I want to start this off with talking about what is release, what is surrender, what is letting go, like what is this concept that we're really talking about. So when it comes to releasing and surrendering, number one, let's kind of look at surrender first, because surrender gets a really, really bad rap in the spiritual community as well as just in life in general. Because when we hear the word surrender, what we actually hear is we don't hear surrender, giving over. We hear surrender, I give up. And that's not necessarily what surrender is within the spiritual context. The spiritual context of surrender is, I am willing to give this over. That's what surrender is. I'm surrendering it over to you. I'm giving it to you because it's no longer mine to handle. So really consider, what are your thoughts about surrender? When you think surrender, be like, oh, here you go. I give it over to you. Or surely that's another great one. Or I can't do it. And once again, it's not about not being able to do it. It's saying right now, I surrender this over because I acknowledge that I'm the one that created the problem, or I'm the one that is focusing on the problem. So I'm giving it over to you for it to be handled for me. Now, if we look at the other way of looking at surrender, which is, I struggle with grudges. Is that the same thing? Gwendolyn, it is the same thing it is the same thing. Grudges, it's giving it is giving in as well. It is giving in and it's not giving in. But first, let's go to Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn, holding a grudge is basically not being willing to surrender. It's not that you're not able to, it's just that you're not willing to, because that's all the divine ever asks us to be, is willing. Are we willing to let this go? Are we willing to give it over and to stop saying that the past is going to continue in this moment? Like, are we willing to give that up, willing to give that over, and willing to see it differently? Not necessarily saying, the trauma didn't happen or the situation didn't happen, but are we willing to have a different perception from a higher vantage point, being spirits? So holding a grudge is the same thing as not surrendering or not releasing, because what you're doing is you're holding on to the story and you have now become the prisoner in your own jail. And the reason I say that is because consider this. When you hold a grudge against someone, what you're doing is you are continuously telling them in your mind the story or the situation that constantly keeps happening. You're like, oh, well, remember when this happened? Well, someone has to be there to tell them that story. So not only are you the prisoner, but you're also the guard, but in your own prison that you have created yourself because you keep on focusing on that person and going back to that problem again and again and again and again. Surrender and release says, instead of holding this person prisoner and myself, because it's only holding me back, it's only causing me pain, let me be willing to hand this over to one who knows, being spirit, and there we go. I'm asking for help when I do that. Show me a sign. That's really beautiful, Shirley. Always great, show me a sign. Always beautiful to ask spirit for that. And spirit can always oblige us if we're willing to not really set the sign, just, what is the sign? Or what would you have me know in this situation? So then we go to releasing. And, once again, we hear releasing all the time. But what is releasing? What are we releasing? I remember this was always such a big thing for me. When, the full moon would come up, and when I first started my journey, and everyone's like, oh my God, the full moon, release, release, release. And I was like, what am I releasing? I was like, okay, I release my poverty consciousness, and I release this and I release that, and I'd do all this stuff, and I'd write it all down, and I'd burn it, and, so forth and so on. But I never really understood what I was doing. There wasn't there was no context to it. And it wasn't until I started studying the Course in Miracles that I learned what I was releasing and what I was surrendering. And what I was doing was I was surrendering over my idea about that particular thing. I was saying, you know what? I am willing to. Now this is where we're going to get into these levels, if you will, of releasing and surrendering. So we're going to call this level 0. Okay, level 0 is right where I was. Okay, I release it all. I released everything. And you have no idea what you're releasing. You have no idea what you're doing. You're just like, okay, I want freedom. So at least you're going in the right direction because you're like, I want freedom. But we have no idea necessarily what we're doing or what we're releasing. We're just kind of following the words, following prompts from other people, and trying to see if that gives us the freedom we're searching for. So that's level 0. Then we can move on to, we can say level 1. Okay. And level 1 is where you're starting to write down and you're really starting to get a little more conscious with what it is you are willing to release. Okay. And maybe you release it physically. Maybe there's like a physical release that you do. Maybe you do some exercise, some yoga, whatever that may be. So that's kind of like that level 1 is like, okay, I'm willing to kind of like maybe work through it, right? Then we have level 2. Okay, so level 0, I'm just kind of saying words. Level 1, I'm saying words, but I'm also trying to pin down what I'm releasing. Like I'm still not quite sure what it is, but I'm getting there. Then we have that level 2, and level 2 is where a lot of people get stuck because level 2 is, they're like, okay, here's the idea. This is it. Like, this is what I'm releasing. It's this idea of poverty, this idea of lack. And we're like, oh my God, yay! We get all excited about it, right? Well, that's still only level 2. That's not the final level of release. Because the final level of release is level 3. I let go of the value for that idea. And I'm going to say that again. And if you want to say it with me, feel free, because it's very powerful when we acknowledge this. When I am releasing or surrendering, I am releasing and surrendering the value that I have for this idea or for this belief. That is the final level, if you will, of releasing and surrendering. It is that ability to say, I let go of the value for this. Now, you may be wondering, okay, well, I want to release it. I want to let it go, but I'm not valuing it because that's why I want to release it. Okay, but if you didn't value it, then why would you still be holding on to it, right? And I have a beautiful friend of mine, and I love when she says this to me. Now, in the moment, I don't love when she says it to me, but afterwards, I always love hearing it. And basically what she'll say is, so how's that working out for you? How's that working out? And if it's working, it's working. And if it's not, then okay, we got to reassess. So we have to look at, okay, well, what is the value here? And what we don't realize is how much value we place on a particular belief, or idea or thought. We put so much value on it. So that's where we really have to be like, okay. And it's really beautiful because, hey, Aunt Mimi, thanks for joining. Thanks for being here. Hi, Helen. Thanks for joining. Thanks for being here. So it's really beautiful when we start to acknowledge that. Okay, the value. So what is the story that I tell myself that, I need to keep this? Why is this so valuable? And I love to use this example because it's an example from my life, and that's the only way I believe that we can really teach properly is through, our own experience. Emotions play a bit of part of it, doesn't it? They can play a part in it, and they can play a part in it by showing us where it is that we still may be wounded or we still may be hurt, or even where we're still valuing that idea in whatever way, shape, or form. But we have to remember, where do emotions come from? So if we look at the map of consciousness, we have first our desire. That's at the core of everything. So first we have our core of desire. Then from our desire, we have a belief. From our belief, we have a thought. From our thought, that's when we get the very close tied together emotion and perception. So where is it all coming from? Well, all of our emotions are coming from our thoughts first. And I know that sounds so weird. And I know it sounds like, no, I have an emotion first, then I think. But if you're really willing to be like, wait a minute, let me really think about that. Emotions are not like a random occurrence. They don't just poof happen. Emotions come from our thoughts and decisions. We're just not always aware that we've made a thought, or that we're having a thought, or that we have attached ourselves to a particular thought, which then becomes a decision. So let's say, and this is the example I'm going to use, let's say that for a very long time that, I just have this belief that life isn't fair, right? I'm just like, life's not fair. Life sucks, right? So let's say I'm carrying that around with me, maybe because my parents said it a lot, maybe because my friends said it a lot, maybe because it kept on getting mirrored back to me. Oh my God, life is so hard. Life is so hard. And so maybe I'm walking through life being like, life is so hard, right? And so I'm walking through life being like, life's so hard, carrying this baggage. And then I maybe come across Abraham Hicks, who's like, life is supposed to be easy and fun. And I'm like, okay, that sounds really great. But you're a spiritual being who's not in a physical body, so you don't know what life here is like, right? So you have no right to tell me life can be easy and fun, because I've always been told life is hard. And right there, when that kind of thought comes up, that's where the questioning has to happen. Wait a minute. Well, I'm hearing this, and I'm hearing a lot of evidence, of other people having that. Well, maybe because those people are just more special than me, or maybe because they're more spiritual. No. The only thing is because they said to themselves, I no longer want to value that thought, that life has to be hard. I'm done telling myself that story. So Sharon says, I've been a hypnotherapist in the past to release negative blocks and reprogram to a more positive mindset. That's beautiful, Sharon. And hypnosis is a great way to do it as well. And so if we're just doing it from a conscious vantage point, if we're not doing it through hypnosis, then, we just come to that acknowledgement. I see this negative pattern. I see this negative thought. Why am I valuing it? Well, maybe because I've been told it my whole life. Maybe because I've seen nothing to the contrary. Like I've never seen evidence to the contrary, except for the super rich or the super spiritual or the people who are more special than me. And you notice I'm using a lot of air quotes with those things because, once again, you are valuing that idea that says these people over here with this certain condition, whatever that condition may be that you say that you do not have, are more special than you. Well, we have to realize no one is more special than anyone else in the divine's eyes. There's a beautiful line in A Course in Miracles that I love to quote. All the children of God are special, so none of them are special. Now, this isn't to say that, God doesn't hold us special, or, the universe, whatever you want to say, doesn't hold you in love, because it does. But it holds everyone else in that exact same love. Okay? And it gives everyone that exact same wisdom, that exact same knowledge. That's why I tell people all the time, and if you've been following me for any amount of time, I say it all the time. I am no better than anyone else. I am no farther along than anyone else. I may be maybe half a step ahead of you in one area, and you may be half a step ahead of me in another. We're all walking each other home. None of us is more special than anyone else. So as we get back onto that releasing, we notice the value, which is, this is the story that I've told myself. And so I'm saying that this story that I've told myself is valuable. Yes, we are, exactly. And so, I'm saying it's valuable. I'm saying I got to hold on to it. Why do I want to hold on to this story? What is it doing for me? Is it making me happy? No. Is it making me right? Now, here's a really big one. And once again, for those of you that have followed me, here comes my favorite question. Do I want to be right, or do I want to be happy? Which one am I going to value more? Me being right that life has to be hard and I just can't win, and because everyone else is better than me, and, they're just more spiritual, rich, blah, 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 blah. Do you want to be right about that? Because if you do, the divine says, okay, you're right. Have fun. And then you get the grand prize. Oh, it's a grand prize. You get to see that reflected in your reality. Now, on the other hand, if you're like, well, I want to be happy, that means you are choosing in that moment to let go of the story that you've told yourself. Now, there are lots of different ways to begin this releasing process. And it can be done through tapping. That's one of my favorite ways, which is just basically scripted tapping. You just tap on certain areas of your body to help you release some of the emotional storage that you've kind of built up, and whatever that emotion may be. Maybe it's rage or anger, hatred, unforgiveness, whatever it is. And, you can tap on that. You can also go to an energy healer, and they can help you to, start to move that energy, but they cannot do anything for you. All they are doing is bringing it up into your awareness, because you may have hidden it. And so all the energy healer, the tapping, the reading, the talk therapy in itself, anything that you kind of go to, they're not doing anything for you. They're giving you the tools in which you can begin to release it yourself, because it comes back down to you. And that's what it's always going to come back to. It's always going to come back to you and what you are willing to let go of. And so another great example is, let's say that, what will I say? Let's say that this was given to me by Colette Baron Reed. Okay, let's say she sent this directly to me. Okay, and then she did not. This was actually a gift from a friend. But let's say that, is just sent to me by Colette Baron Reed, who I find to be amazing, fantastic. I think she's awesome. And let's say that she's like, oh, here you go, Ron, I got you this gift, and, may it bless you for eternity. Whatever she may put in there. And let's say then that, I move and I lose it. Does that mean I lose her blessing? Does that mean I lose her love? Does that mean I lose anything? Nope. I don't lose a thing. The only thing that I may lose is the physical object. I don't lose anything else. Just like another example, I'm just going to keep on giving you examples because they just keep on flooding into my head about all these different times. So when I was working at KinderCare, I actually did have a woman who was moving, and she had lived in her house, gave birth, well, not necessarily given birth in the house, but, brought her newborn baby back to the house. And they had to move because they could no longer afford the home. So they had to go to something smaller. And she was, this woman was always so shining and bright and happy. And just to see her so sad, I asked her, we were in the baby room together and I was in there working with her for that day. because someone didn't show up and I was the only one who was certified in the baby CPR. So I had to go in there with her, which is fine because I love the babies. And so, we're in there and I just kept on, feeling it all day. Like she was just so sad. And I was like, hey, what's going on? And she was like, oh, Ryan, we had to sell our house and this. And all of a sudden, and this is how I love the divine that speaks for me, and through me. I love when it does this. And I remember looking at her and I said, but do the bricks hold your memories? She goes, oh yes, each one. And I said, oh really? So if I come to your house and I take out one of the bricks, I'm going to be able to view the memory? She goes, no. And I said, oh, okay. So if I take out some of the siding, I'm going to be able to see a story written, right? She goes, no. And I said, oh, but when I look into the fireplace and you light a fire, like your whole life story is going to flash before my eyes, right? And she was like, no. And I said, exactly, because the story that you have or the memories that you're holding aren't in the home. They're in here. This is where they are. They're in, divine mind. They're in your consciousness. The home is a representation of those memories, but it in itself does not hold the memories. And we as humans, we tend to put a lot of value on things. And we say, this thing now represents Colette Baron Reed's love. This thing now represents Colette Baron Reed's blessing. This thing now represents, all the love of the divine. This is just a representation. It is not the truth. Because where does the blessing come from? Does the blessing come from the bracelet? No. It comes from the divine. It comes from Colette. It comes from, whoever's blessing me at the time. Does the memory of the house necessarily belong to the house? No, it belongs to me. And I get to take that memory with me. No one can take it from me unless I give them permission to, and I'm not giving permission. And the same thing goes for the value that we hold for our ideas. The divine cannot take from you what you are not willing to give. So if I had a scratch right here on my finger and I'm holding it and I'm like, oh my God, we're just going to say Sharon. We're just like, Sharon, oh my gosh, I cut my finger and it's so bad and it's bleeding. And you see the blood, gushing out there and you're like, okay, and Sharon would be like, Ron, oh my God, I want to help you. I need you, move your hand. Sharon, I can't, please do something. And she would be like, I can't do anything for you until you move your hand. I could beg her for help, but she can't do anything for me until I move my hand, and then she can put a Band-Aid on it. Or then she can put stitches in it, or then she can help me in whatever way she can help me. But she cannot do for me what I am not willing to show her or what I'm not willing to give to her. So let's now do a little backtrack. Let's do a little review. So level 0 of releasing is I'm just saying a bunch of pretty words and I'm just kind of copying other people, but nothing's really happening at all. Level 1 is I'm getting a little bit more aware of like, okay, I'm releasing this idea. I can see I'm releasing ideas, or maybe I'm releasing people. I'm doing some physical things, like maybe I'm doing some yoga or doing some tapping, maybe I'm doing something like that. But I'm still not quite getting to the real core of things, right? And then we go to level 2, which is, okay, now I get that I am releasing the idea. Like I'm releasing the idea of poverty. I'm releasing the idea of hatred. I'm releasing the idea of unforgiveness. Like I get that. I understand that. But I'm still not quite there. Not until we get to level 3, which is what we've been talking about, which is releasing the value that we hold for that thought, for that belief in whatever way. And once we get to that point, that's where true release and surrender happens, because you are now saying, I no longer hold value for this story in whatever way. I may have in the past, I may have for a long time. Hey, Miss Karen, thanks for joining. Thanks for being here. So I may have for a long time, but I am now willing to give this story over, because it's not up to me to heal it. And that's another really big one that we tend to do. And if you've watched me for any extent of time, You hear me say it all the time. We are not the healers. We are only there to hand it over to be healed. To be healed. You are not the healer. You're just handing it off to the divine so it can be healed for you and through you. That your job is not to heal yourself. Now, if you still believe there are steps that you need to take, then take them. Like I've said before, if I have a headache, I'm going to forgive myself for believing in pain, believing in sacrifice, believing that, the weather can affect me, because maybe it's like a tension headache, or maybe the barometric pressure rose or dropped or whatever. I can forgive myself, and then I can go take an Advil, because I'm still taking a physical step. There's something that I believe I need to do. And so, wonderful. You are welcome. So, we always have to take those physical steps, and the divine is always going to lead us towards those physical steps that we believe we need to take. Whatever those steps are. Maybe it's the tapping. Maybe it's going to a healer. Maybe it's doing hypnosis. Maybe it's, there's so many different ways in which we can begin that process of release. But it is about acknowledging that not only am I letting go of the thought, I'm letting go of the value that I hold for the thought, whatever that thought may be. So if it's life has to be hard, I'm impoverished, I'll never be rich, I'll never be anything. I mean, all these things that I'm telling you are thoughts that I have had myself, and I've had to be willing to release. I've had to be willing to get to the core of them and say, you know what? I don't value this anymore, because this is not my story, nor does it have to be my story anymore. And, just because we release it once, great. If we release it once, fantastic. But if it comes back, that's okay. It's merely an invitation for you to say, okay, I'm releasing it. I'm releasing it again. That's it. I'm releasing it again. I see it. I acknowledge it. And as I see it and acknowledge it, I know I don't want it anymore. So I give it over. That's it. And it will be healed to the level at which you are willing to stop yourself from suffering. And I know that sounds like a spiritual platitude. And I know it sounds like, well, I don't want to suffer, so I'm willing to give all the suffering away. But if we are suffering in any way, shape, or form, that means we're still valuing the suffering. We're still valuing the fact that, we have to suffer, or we have to go through trial and tribulation. One thing I learned reading the Course and reading other spiritual texts, the divine doesn't test us. And I know that was such a big thing for me in the beginning of my spiritual journey. Oh, this is a test. No, it's not a test. The divine is not testing you. The divine doesn't need to test you, because it already knows you're worthy of everything. Okay? The divine does not have to test you, because it already knows you to be worthy of everything, with nothing missing. So it doesn't test you. You know what tests you? Your own ego. Because the ego is going to throw stuff at you, not because it has power, not because it's powerful, but because it's trying to get your attention. So it's going to throw an idea out there at you that it knows has gotten your attention in the past, because what is your ego but the idea of separation that lives within you? All that it is, has no power. It only has power because we give it power. And so it's going to throw ideas and perceptions out there that say, see, look over here, because it wants us to walk down the darkened corridors of our mind that we have already shut the door to. So imagine, if you will, you have just come out of like a haunted house, right? And, you shut the door behind you, but all of a sudden that door starts to jiggle, and you go and you're like, no, I already know what's behind that door. I already know it's something I don't want. I already know this. And so you start walking away, but then that door jiggles a little bit more, and you're kind of like, well, what if the door changed? Like, what if something changed behind the door? And then maybe, you hear another noise, and you're like, ooh, you know what? I'm going to go over there, and I'm going to check on that door. And then you go, even though you know it's something you don't want, and you still go check it out anyway. And we all do it. And it's because the ego's just trying to get our attention. It's just saying, come play with me. Hey, you, come play with me. Because the ego knows without our focus and attention, it would no longer exist. It would no longer have any power, because it only has the power that we are willing to give it. And the power we give it is by focusing upon it, focusing on separation, focusing on fear, focusing on suffering, focusing on guilt, focusing on where we've missed the mark, like where we've messed up in life. We all make mistakes, but here's the beauty. The divine wants to correct those for you. You've messed up. That's okay. The divine says, honey, don't worry about it. Let's go correct it. Let me correct it for you and through you. That's it. That's what a miracle really is. It's a correction from fearful thinking to loving thinking, to seeing things differently. So, yeah, I think that's just going to kind of wrap up our talk here about those levels of release and what releasing is and how it really affects us. And if you're interested in finding out more about me or my services, feel free to go visit my website. Or if you didn't get to catch all of this and you want to see the replay, you can of course catch it here. Or you can also go to my YouTube channel, and both my website and my YouTube channel are both pinned, are not pinned, but they're in the description of the video, and it's also pinned here at the top of my page here at Simply Intuitive. So I thank you for joining me. I thank you for being here, and this has been such a wonderful discussion we've got to have today.